Soon after the arrival of Baha'u'llah and his party in Akka, the governor visited the barracks for inspection. Abdu'l-Baha, accompanied by a few believers, went to see him. But the governor was discourteous and spoke to them in a provocative manner. He threatened to cut the supply of bread if one of the prisoners went missing, and then order them back to their room. One of the master's attendants could not bear to remain silent after such insulting treatment. He retorted with rage and hurled back at the governor some offensive remarks. Abdu'l-Baha immediately chastened his attendant by slapping him hard in the face in front of the governor and ordering him to return to his room. This action by Abdu'l-Baha not only diffused a dangerous situation, but also opened the eyes of the governor to the existence of a real leader among the prisoners, a leader who would act with authority and justice. Due to this action, the governor's attitude towards Abdu'l-Baha changed. He realized that, contrary to the wild rumors circulating in Akka at the time, Abdu'l-Baha and his family were from a noble background and not criminals as he had been led to believe. The governor, therefore, began to act in a more humane way towards the prisoners. He eventually agreed to substitute the allotted ration of bread with a sum of money and allowed a small party of the prisoners, escorted by guards, to visit the markets of Akka daily to buy their provisions. One day in 1912, the beloved master was very stern while in New York. He held the book of the hidden words in his hand and walked back and forth, and then lifted the book high and said, "Whosoever does not live up to these words is not of me." Forgiveness. Abdu'l-Baha was born on the same night that the Bab declared his mission in Shiraz, on 22nd May 1844. So on that day in 1906, it was about the Bab, his work and message, that he spoke. For the occasion, over 200 guests were to dine at the master's table. Since dawn, he had been busy helping with the work involved, himself kneading dough to be put in the ovens, in gay spirits, inspiring, uplifting, cheering all his helpers. Later, he assisted in passing the platters, the rice, the lamb, the fruits of the region, of such large size, such color, and such fragrance as only the sunshine of the East produces and paints. Moving among his 200 guests, he spoke to them as he served them. Such divine words of love and spiritual import. If one of you has been wounded in heart by the words or deeds of another during the past year, forgive him now, that in purity of heart and loving pardon you may feast in happiness and arise renewed in spirit. It is related of Sheikh Mahmud of Akka that he hated the Baha'is. While many of his fellow townsmen had gradually come to realize how very wrong they had been and were speaking of the prisoners in terms of appreciation and praise, Sheikh Mahmud remained adamant in his hatred. One day, he was present at a gathering where people were talking of Abdu'l-Baha as a good man, a remarkable man. The sheikh could bear it no longer and stormed out, saying that he would show up this Abbas Effendi for what he was. In blazing anger, he rushed to the mosque where he knew Abdu'l-Baha could be found at that hour and laid violent hands upon him. The master looked at the sheikh with that serenity and dignity which only he could command, and reminded him of what the Prophet Muhammad had said, "Be generous to the guest, even should he be an infidel." Sheikh Mahmud turned away. His wrath had left him, so had his hate. All that he was conscious of was a deep sense of shame and a bitter compunction. He fled to his house and barred the door. Some days later, he went straight into the presence of Abdu'l-Baha, fell on his knees and besought forgiveness. Which door but thine can I seek? Whose bounty can I hope for but thine? He became a devoted Baha'i. In 1911, the master spent a few quiet days in the French Alps, presumably to rest, before continuing to London. Here took place a remarkable encounter, which illustrates the universality of his love, even towards those whose hearts ran hostile to him and to his father's cause. Juliet Thompson tells us the following about this occasion, which she herself witnessed. Monstrously sinned against, too great was he to claim the right to forgive. In his almost offhand brushing aside of a cruelty, in the ineffable sweetness with which he ignored it, it was as though he said, "Forgiveness belongs only to God." An example of this was his memorable meeting with the royal prince, Zila Sultan, brother of the Shah of Persia, Muhammad Ali Shah. Not alone Abdu'l-Baha, but a great number of his followers, band after band of Baha'i martyrs, had suffered worse than death at the hands of these two princes. When the downfall of the Shah, with that of the Sultan of Turkey, set Abdu'l-Baha at liberty, Abdu'l-Baha, beginning his journey through Europe, went first to Thonon-les-Bains on the Lake of Geneva. The exiled Shah was then somewhere in Europe. Zila Sultan, also in exile with his two sons, had fled to Geneva. Thus, Abdu'l-Baha, the exonerated and free, and Zila Sultan, the fugitive, were almost within a stone's throw of each other. In the suite of Abdu'l-Baha was a distinguished European who had visited Persia, and there met Zila Sultan. One day, when the European was standing on the balustraded terrace of the hotel in Thonon, and Abdu'l-Baha was pacing to and fro at a little distance, Zila Sultan approached the terrace. Abdu'l-Baha was wearing, as always, the turban, the long white belted robe, and long appa of Persia. His hair, according to the ancient custom of the Persian nobility, flowed to his shoulders. Zila Sultan, after greeting the European, immediately asked, "Who is that Persian nobleman?" Abdu'l-Baha, "Take me to him." In describing the scene later, the European said, "If you could have heard the wretch mumbling his miserable excuses." But Abdu'l-Baha took the prince in his arms. "All that is of the past," he answered. "Never think of it again. Send your two sons to see me. I want to meet your sons." They came one at a time. Each spent a day with the master. The first, though an immature boy, nevertheless showed him great deference. The second, older and more sensitive, left the room of Abdu'l-Baha, where he had been received alone, weeping uncontrollably. "If only I could be born again," he said, "into any other family than mine." For not only had many Baha'is been martyred during his uncle's reign, upwards of 100 by his father's instigation, and the life of Abdu'l-Baha threatened again and again, but his grandfather, Nasir-ed-Din Shah, had ordered the execution of the Bab, as well as the torture and death of thousands Babis. The young prince was born again, a Baha'i. Speaking to a group of friends at a meeting in Chicago in 1912, he said, "Be in perfect unity. Never become angry with one another. Let your eyes be directed toward the kingdom of truth and not toward the world of creation. Love the creatures for the sake of God and not for themselves. You will never become angry or impatient if you love them for the sake of God. Humanity is not perfect. There are imperfections in every human being, and you will always become unhappy if you look toward the people themselves. But if you look toward God, you will love them and be kind to them. For the world of God is the world of perfection and complete mercy. Therefore, do not look at the shortcomings of anybody. See with the sight of forgiveness. We are told that there was one name that always brought joy to the face of Baha'u'llah. His expression would change at the mention of Mary Magdalene's name. Here was a woman who was transformed from the gentle, appealing mistress of Novatos to the saintly disciple of Jesus Christ. The Master said to Ethel Rosenberg, the first English woman to embrace the Baha'i faith in her native land, "It is said of Mary Magdalene that out of her went 7 devils. This means 7 evil qualities which Jesus cast out of her by teaching her the truth. She was not such a bad woman as some supposed before her conversion, but the wonder is that such a saint and miracle of purity and goodness could have been created by the new birth. She was greater than all the disciples of Jesus because she alone stood firm after his death and never wavered.